Hey everyone, welcome back. The main message that's coming through today for me is something that's a far off departure from where my mind, heart, and soul have been for a long time, just considering the outside for a moment. And that specific thing is everything's going to work out. Everything's going to work out. It kind of reminds me of what I told a friend of mine who was dying of the same kind of cancer I had, who I became friends with shortly after becoming diagnosed. Once he later in the year became terminal, I told him, either way, man, you're going to be okay. It's amazing, whether we acknowledge it or not, just how much of our existence focuses on survival, suffering, and fear. I don't think it's something that we intentionally do, but it's helpful to recognize that our brains are wired, from an evolutionary standpoint, to respond to threats, to assess, to be in a heightened arousal state, so we can then react to stressors within our environment to survive, procreate, and act accordingly, right? While we can all talk here on science terms about it, the reason why I wanted to bring that up today is because there's something I want to read. So I don't want to get too much into this because it might already be talked about in what I just jotted down here. Let me just offer you a little bit of context. So I just got done with two, not back to back, but two interviews today with two potentially new positions. And just so happens, I thought both of them were full-time. Turns out both of them are part-time. But I feel like the interviews went extremely, extremely well for reasons that I cannot comprehend, and reasons that the way in which we even show up in our lives today should be arising from fully harnessing our soul, our spirit, and our essence, and acting in genuine ways, not in ways of mistrust or fear or doubt or disbelief, but like, hey, listen, we see everything that's going on in this world, the macro at large right now. And I think it's only natural that our hearts and souls and minds are extremely bothered and disturbed, especially with what was released, statements released earlier today by our so-called president. But separate, outside, we can revisit that in a little bit. But aside from that, all the struggle and suffering and seeming sacrifice that each of us have had to endure, listen, you're really rich, but even if you're really rich, you're not like him when the stocks are going down, right? So maybe you can still relate. But even if you are secure, but I have a whole separate philosophy on that. I guess I'll discuss that real quick. When it comes to the human condition and human nature in general, we, as this was taught to us in high school, I think by high school, most of us had read The Great Gatsby, right? That we think we're going to be happy, or we think we're going to have the capacity to do that next thing, if and only when this thing shows up for us. Why? Because we're stressed the fuck out. And listen, we have things happening in our own personal lives right now, let alone what's going on with the world, that it's not our fault. It's not for our fault for believing the deceiving lies. And my question is, what percentage of the population actually believes it? Apparently, an alarming number of people believe it. I guess just on a tangent for a second, would I choose to give up who I am and the gift I am to this world in the ways in which I show up, or you show up, or as others show up in this world for one another, for being oblivious? That's a hard question. Truly, from my standpoint, I believe the answer would still be no. Listen, pain, suffering, grief, growth, liminal spaces are inherently discomforting. And for some of us, we're actually experiencing far worse than that, right? With not being able to pay for things, trying to find work. even being denied in even our basic cares and rights as beings, right? Like there should be inalienable human rights. I actually watched a video earlier today that discussed that everything's been commoditized, in this game, as I call it, of life. What do I mean by game? I'm talking about in general, and I'm not trying to sound like an anarchist when I say this, but since when should you be brought into a world where your ability to be able to even provide basic care for oneself be owned by someone else? I'm talking about all the natural resources of Earth have been bought up, commoditized, and monopolized. That even before we leave our mom's wombs, as soon as we're born into debt. Like, why is that person's water their water when it's naturally come from the earth, etc., right? I think so many of us get so brainwashed in the philosophy, it's just the way it is, this is what you're supposed to do, it's the reason why schools exist, etc., is to prepare us, sometimes well, in other ways not so well, and oftentimes not so well because, they don't make economics or the way to actually play the game to win, not just survive, is not really offered at face value to kids in this world in the way they're educated, right? Don't get me wrong, I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, don't get me wrong. But getting back to what I was just discussing here a second ago, that's us coming into a demanding world. We already have, fortunately for us as humans, everything's domesticated. There are comforts to living in a society, don't get me wrong. I recognize because I used to watch all those survival shows like Alone, where people like literally get, dropped off on an island or dropped off in the wild Arctic and they have to fend for themselves. And it's a really extremely bizarre kind of thing because you're like, well, they just have the, phone and they can call if something comes up. So it's not truly alone, the true sense of the word. So I'm not going to, confuse the fact that we have to work for everything that we get by putting in the inherent work. That's where some of the comforts of living in a society comes from, right? Is that we all do favors for one another. However, with where things were to the way they were before to the way they are now, we're seeing more of that before, right? Where everyday people are disenfranchised, that were told that 40 hours of work a week is not enough. Now it's 60, maybe it's 2 full-time jobs. Wages have outstripped all of this. And it's all by intention and design that, the rich and powerful, if you want to call them powerful, I mean, obviously they are powerful because that's had an effect on a lot of people and even brainwashed, a whole another subset of people. This groupthink or society-based, mindset that we just never question. And we never question to understand why in the 1950s what brought about the middle class. You start going back and answering those questions, or even questions about the Federal Reserve, you start to realize that the game is rigged and that we're essentially in our own form of slavery or bondage when we don't have the resources to live out our life in the way that we intend or wish. And day by day, things keep getting harder and harder and harder. And so it's only natural then, like when we delay and say, well, I need to wait until I reach that milestone before I can do that. That's because we're stuck in survival, right? It shuts down creativity. It makes us focus, unfortunately, on things outside of our control rather than the things that are inside our control. Like the question I ask myself right now as a world, but especially as a nation within the U.S., what the fuck are we doing? We literally have a president right now that's essentially claiming that he's ready to hit the button and mass genocide aside from the various war crimes and everything else that he's committed up to this point, on top of him being a pedophile, this is scary stuff. And I'm not trying to get you guys all incensed in this, because I know you're already feeling it if you've kept up with the news. But the point is, today I walked away from both these interviews feeling light, so much lighter, like I've just surrendered a huge weight or huge burden to Source, to God, Spirit, higher power, Jesus. As far as what I have control over and what I don't have control over. Unfortunately, the society that we live in over the course of the past 70 years, 80 years, we've seen this pattern, and maybe it's destined to happen every 80 years. Perhaps not, though, because I really think they intentionally want to keep things rigged so badly that there's no way for us to come back from this other than to wipe ourselves out to annihilation. I think that Trump is clearly a walking, anything that you can wrap up about the human condition and human nature that's absolutely loathsome and the embodiment of everything that a human should not be, and also anti to Jesus, anti to Christ, antichrist he is. And really, when he got in 2016, I really thought this is the way things were going to start off. Really, they gave us a soft launch, just like he does it with him choreographing things ahead of time and using intimidation tactics and fear. He's a person that knows he can use fear to make people scared to get what he wants. And that's his negotiation. It's not about consent here. I'm not going to talk too much more about this, but it's not about consent. This is about him saying, if you guys want to be saved, you have to I'm forcing you to give up all your autonomy, essentially to take you over. Otherwise, I'm going to nuke you away. See, that's not about deals anymore, right? We understand that. And we already know he says he doesn't, he's not a fascist, or that, he's not a king. But yes, he is. I'm not saying he is in power, but that's exactly what he's after. It's been nothing but gaslighting, fear, and all this stuff. And really, I've seen the world really kind of fall apart over the past 10 years when we've got all this amazing technology that connects us with one another. Why then are we not living in the peak or the height of all times, especially if the United States is, at record-breaking dollars? The answer is because it's always been trickled up economics, never trickled down. And you kind of have to go off and do your own side research about what happened, pre-World War II and post-World War II up until now to understand all that's happened. And maybe at some point I'll put out a video. So if you leave comments and rate, I will seriously consider compiling something about it. But it's already been pretty well documented in other YouTube videos to a far off degree. Maybe not meta compiled across the various ideas. That would probably be like an hour and a half, 2 hour documentary. And I'd have to find B-rolls. You guys probably want to be just when I listen to me here speaking, unless you're going to listen to this as a podcast in front of the camera, do this for, an hour and a half clipped together. So I'd have to probably consider some B-roll footage. But anyways, as soon as I got done with my second interview, I just jotted this down, and I thought it was very apropos to get you to understand the spirit of what I'm saying. We're all waiting for that break in life. The time in which we are so pleasantly and undeniably surprised in life. And it comes from a level of effortlessness that we show up as ourselves and we do, not about performance. So much as it's the way of American culture, so as much the way in which we're indoctrinated to live this way. Of course, you already know, as an aside, this takes away self-agency and autonomy and voice. We don't have very much voice right now when it comes to the political, socioeconomic climate as of now, and other leaders are letting us down. As a people, we have to stand up and do something about this. We need to use our collective voices. So I think maybe a new party needs to be formed, in my own personal opinion. I think that's the only way we get out of this. So when it comes from a level of effortlessness, where we show up as ourselves, mesh up, start speaking the same languages using the same semantics as connecting the same synapses. Left brain talks to right brain, right hemisphere of the brain, and the unfolding of the conversation that unfolds organic, seamless, seemingly as if it was meant to be, right? Rather than forced, rather than being performant. Where our guard comes down, the ability to surrender, control, and truly embody and trust it. This world and all its vastness and resources seemingly and increasingly has become naturally untrusting, hyper-competitive, and tightly controlled, but paradoxically out of control at the same time. In our own desire to grasp onto any control we have left, it actually becomes more of a problem. It becomes more perpetual. Trying to think of a good example of that. Like quicksand, I guess for a fly, Venus flytrap, maybe. I've always bad when it comes to change, but today, through the grace of God, I welcome the reinvention. I've been asking myself for the past several years, having gone through a lot, not just financially or with the way in which people show up, or even workplace situations. Really only one workplace situation, my most recent one. My most recent one. I don't know why, but when you are a chosen one, a light bringer, a truth teller, in a world that's increasingly seeing vulnerability as a mental condition, where seemingly there's natural consent through silence, we need to recognize that we are very much valid for the way we feel. So I just want to get that off first and foremost. We are valid for the way we feel. I think a lot of us have been hit with disappointment after disappointment after disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, that we've truly grown collectively to not expect anything. Because in the past, when our hopes would get up, when we thought justice would be served, just as an example, in this case, justice is served, it looks like the bastard's getting what he finally reaps what he sows, it's let go. The can is kicked down the proverbial road. And this has caused that collective human behavior. I'm guilty of it. I think everyone's guilty of it to a degree. But I think the way in which we show up as people still inherently tells a story. It all goes back to the hurt people. I disagree. Generally true. Hurt people, but a very small subset of hurt people actively choose to not hurt other people, but to heal, to learn, to grow. And growth is something that's very uncomfortable for some people. Believe it or not, you may not realize this, but there's a subset of the population. Well, this part would make sense, that you would know. A subset of the population that's just literally going on autopilot. They're not thinking anything about it. It's just like a person brushing their teeth 1,000 times. Eventually, they don't look at all the nuances of things. It just... The bottom line is that's an innate human behavior, right? Like a normal human reaction. I think the ways in which we show up as the people that we are, whether or not we're kind, caring, intelligent, giving, versus leading, vulgar, commanding, and I wish there was a verb for this, but maybe there is one. I can't think of it, but people that are like sadists, basically, that show up and say, I was hurt, so I'm going to take out this hurt on another person randomly. Or once you are in a position of someone suffering, but then you're at the other hand of that, actually inflicting the suffering, you actually get off on that. Unfortunately, again, don't mean to keep bringing it back up. Truly points back to that guy. You know what I'm talking about. I don't even want to talk about him, but anyways, the man that literally did not even put his hand on the Bible when he's sworn in. It said, in front of people, I don't need God. I don't need my voters' help. Yet he does need them, right, to win, you'd think. That's a whole nother aside, but, I do question the validity of this last election cycle. Do I truly think after he committed a coup against the United States that we're just going to turn around and allow him back in and give him free reins and immunity? No, this feels very much planned and staged. It very much does. And they had the power to do it, had the power to do it. And you look at what happened with his quote unquote attempted assassination. And you look at the Bible, the first head of the beast, the first manifestation of Satan's supposed to be, a beast that, was shot in the ear. Yet as a quick healer, the following day we see that it's perfectly healed within like 2 days. I'm a fast healer. They call it the lobe. Like, listen, we live in insane times in an insane world. What I'm basically trying to get across to you is so many of us are just waiting for that sign, waiting for that break, waiting for that moment where even if it doesn't solve our problems, we have something we can resonate with. And, as a sounding board to be able to hear truth. And like I said, in a world that seems to call it out, make fun of it, abuse it, and toss it to the side in a used manner. And we need to remember that Donald Trump is not just the cause. I do think he's largely the cause where we are today, no doubt. 10 years of this crap. But rather a symptom of a larger rotted out system. That is the Federal Reserve, that is United States capitalism, crony capitalism. It's not even capitalism. It's not true laissez-faire economics. We've got it's rife with antitrust. Don't even get me started. The phrase that really reigns true through today is every accusation is a form of self-admission. So I applaud anyone out there that's choosing not to perpetuate the cycle. God knows I've not perpetuated the cycle when I've had to show up to defend myself in various ways in my life for things I shouldn't have to defend myself on. When I've told the truth. And yet we're challenged. But like I said, getting back to the point, as chosen ones, chosen people, have to understand that there's power through collective voice. And the ones that have the courage to speak up and say it is like a sanity check. And it's also like an antenna tuning into the right frequency to understand what kind of feeling I'm trying to put forth here. But the bottom line is, like I said, all of us are waiting for that breaking point, that either that breaking point or that breakthrough. And for a lot of us, like I said, we've become so numb to it that we don't even, when we see it, we're like, is this what we're seeing? I show up today 100% as myself. I said some prayers to God, and I think God works in mysterious ways because God's never let me down. Literally every time in my life where I've been down to, single dollars in my account, or in this specific case, like $5,000 in debt right now. But trying to hold it strong just a little bit longer, is when I see him show up. Both the positions I interviewed with today, very surprisingly and unexpectedly, one of them was with a big corporation or company, but has more of a, does have some laid backness to them. I think you'll kind of already know they're a computer company that applied for. And another is for a systems administrator, remote work, I think 1 day a week and a couple towns over. So it's going to be a bit of a drive. It'd be like, 50 minutes one way to give you an idea, but only 1 day per week. But it turns out they're both, for reasons unbeknownst to me, only hiring part-time. Both of them I can sense really like me, and I'm not saying both of them are going to work out, but I get this really strong sense with who I interviewed today with both of them, both computer positions, that I really resonated with the person I was speaking to. I showed up and I was myself and had many ways in which I already related to that person. And don't say that's not a factor in hiring. It absolutely is. Part of it's just straight up luck, who you're put forth, to demonstrate who you are, to set a positive first impression. Obviously, it's God, though, most first and foremost. But when you really think about that process, just think of how that's changed in the past 5 years alone with COVID, starting with COVID, but now with AI. So many companies are on a hiring freeze. And don't get me started with, the job statistics. I don't think we can trust them anymore. They've been 100% compromised. He doesn't want to show negative numbers, so he's going to do hell or high water to whatever to eliminate that. Even if that means firing truth tellers. So that break for me and the real wake-up call for me that everything's all right is when I really gave up full control. Like I said, God showed up in my life last minute all the time, has made things work. There's a path forward for all of us. It's going to be through varying levels of discomfort. And I honestly strongly believe the more we believe things are not going to work out, the more we attract that. I believe in that just from what's talked about in the Bible. Like one of the most frequent words is fear. Reject the fear, embrace the love. And I was just going to say, just remind myself again where I was. From starting with COVID-19 to AI to now the hellscape where it looks like we're on the edge of an apocalypse, people are starting to become naturally more mistrusting for reasons that are actually harmful, not just to society and businesses, but collectively. Our ability to connect with one another is truly hindered as we're all seeking to try to maintain control over anything that we can for a seemingly out of control process. And like I mentioned earlier, when we cling to that, it actually causes more of a problem. The real reality is we now have a climate in which it's very difficult to get to know people. People are going to be naturally mistrusting or maybe not receptive to others' advances as far as friendship or association. And last but not least, it's hurting us inside, basically. Is it Aristotle? I think it was. Socrates that said, humans are innately social creatures. We should, by all accounts, be living and thriving in an awesome environment right now. Record stocks, so that should trickle down. So there should be no problem with jobs, right? So we should have, our monetary concerns taken care of. We live in a super interconnected age where we should all be able to socialize, yet we're not. It's normal for cliques to pop up and for us to connect, more on the micro scale, because how can an individual know more than, I think they said on average, like 250 people of your lifetime with any appreciable level of emotional wealth, and actually knowing someone, getting to know someone. So the, human brain is kind of limited in capacity in that sense. But the thing I'm putting forth today is I've been talking about the sense of unease that we feel deeply beneath the surface, not even deeply, just even lurking just right beneath the surface is this thing I'm calling the undercurrent. I haven't come up with a name of what I'm calling right now, since it just occurred today, but when that break finally happens, and part of it's based on mindset, I'm not trying to gaslight you, I'm just saying the way it naturally the way it naturally unfolded for me today, I can't help but to accept that this was a message from God, and I needed to get that out there. That there is a path forward one way or another, and to the importance of recognizing that we need each other more than we've ever needed each other before. And it's scarily creepy how Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear Solid franchise and series, had Death Stranding based in a post-apocalyptic America, a war in nuclear-ravaged America. And listen, I'm not wanting that for us. I'm not. But seemingly we have Alzheimer's, dementia-riddled, ego-addled, drug-addled president. And do you think it's an accident? Like, for anyone out there, MAGA lovers and whatnot, why would you deny for a moment, other than you say they were bought up by the Democrats? Why did Facebook and Google, through YouTube, and Twitter, which is now X, I guess, since it's been bought up, why was Trump kicked off their platforms? That's back when we had some semblance of morality with the corporate base that recognized certain things were unpopular. Right now, we have wildly unpopular things that are being thrust in front of us and being told to lick it and lap it up like dogs. So hopefully that stirred something inside of you to recognize you're not wrong for the way you feel. I'll be praying immensely for all of you out there as you're on your own individual path to that next thing. But I really encourage us to connect. We all need to really connect up. There needs to be a collective unified voice, and I don't know if that's in the creation of a new party. I don't know if that's in what that looks like. But the point is, we recognize that what's happening out there is not our voice. That's not what we want. We're not supportive of it. And for the longest time, I think the intelligent, kind, caring people don't like to play games, don't like to get into the gaslighting, lies, games that some of these sick, delusional, and twisted people get themselves into. Because it turns out there's a whole subset of people that essentially don't show up as themselves. They care about facades, and arguably Trump and his et al., all of them truly don't care even about facades at this point. But they're going to choreograph, as he's done for years, to moving the goalpost each time. And really, in the past year, we've seen massive moves. As soon as he was given immunity through the Supreme Court, really, it was checkmate, game, set, match. Not that the game's over, but the battle has been won by them, yes, on a couple occasions. So I want you to remember the importance of self-care, to take care of yourself, spend time away from that information. Just keep trying. There's nothing wrong with trying. God knows we've heard plenty of stories of people that were denied over and over and over and over and over. So persistence matters. Try to not internalize the meaning of it too much. We're currently, I think, in a pretty strong hiring freeze, especially within the tech sector, but a lot of sectors as, COVID-19 added uncertainty, as AI is adding more uncertainty of which jobs they can automate away, not automate away, or they're trying to right now, and they're seen challenges with it. I'm all about optimization and efficiency, but it's getting to start to be really ridiculous and very dehumanizing. Why would any of us agree that when you call on the phone and you connect with an AI, to route the calls, how that's better? We already hated the phone trees, but now they're doing it with AI. I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. So this over-reliance on technology, and even the way that technology is currently being used to weaponize for mass surveillance and whatnot, this is all feels very planned. It all feels very one world government-y, to be honest. But I just want you guys to all stay steadfast, know that you're not alone. I see you, I feel you, I hear you, rather. I hear you. And I just encourage you to persist through it. I know at some point it starts to feel like masochism, but it's also important to not state that. I'll update you on my journey, let you know how things went. But today kind of turns over a new leaf for me here on April 7th, 2026. I wish you all well. Until next time. See ya.